Amidst a torrential downpour, Emily spotted an elephant standing resolutely in the middle of the path, its large eyes fixated on her. She couldn't believe what she was looking at. The elephant cautiously attempted to approach her, its gestures filled with a strange, almost desperate intention. Emily, soaked and bewildered, paused to understand this unexpected encounter. With a mix of fear and fascination, she decided to follow the elephant, stepping into an adventure beyond her wildest dreams. Emily's eyes widened when she saw the huge elephant approaching her. Her first instinct was to run away, but something stopped her. She had never seen an elephant in real life before, and it was truly a fascinating sight. Besides, the animal didn't look aggressive or angry at all, so Emily decided to keep her distance, but she didn't immediately run. The two of them just stood there, completely still, and they simply stared at each other for a moment. Emily thought that she was dreaming. It felt so unreal. There was nobody else with them, just her and this enormous elephant. Pretty quickly, though, the moment passed, and the elephant took a step in Emily's direction. Her heart was beating in her chest like it was going to explode, but she stood still, not wanting to do anything that might scare the animal away. It was a truly magical moment. However, she soon understood that it wasn't just luck. The elephant was approaching her for a reason. It seemed like it was asking her to follow it into the woods. Emily doubted whether or not she should do this, but only for a second. Moments later, she already found herself between the green bushes and trees, following the elephant. She had no idea where it was leading her, but it seemed to be urgent. The rain was still pouring down from the sky, and she almost slipped in the mud several times. After a while, she started to wonder whether she had made a mistake. She was soaked, and she was starting to get cold. Her feet and legs were covered in mud, and she had no idea where she was. She had never even been in this forest before, and she was completely disoriented. How was she ever going to get out of there? Emily started lagging behind a bit, and she was wondering how to get home. If I just walk back in a straight line, I'll find my way back to that street eventually, she thought to herself. She shook her head, letting out an annoyed chuckle. What was I even thinking? Following an elephant into the woods? She finally stopped walking and turned around, ready to go home and hoping that she could find the way back. But as she took her first few steps, one thing became clear. The elephant did not want her to leave. It let out a loud trumpet that made Emily jump up in surprise, and when she turned back to face it, she was surprised by what she saw. The elephant had stopped walking as well, and it was looking at her. It moved its trunk back and forth, and it made a low, rumbling noise. Then it continued walking, but after a few steps it turned around, as if to check on Emily and make sure that she was following it. She stared at it with her mouth open. There was no doubt about it anymore. "All right, show me then," she whispered as she ventured deeper into the woods, deciding to follow the elephant after all. Its signals were clear now, and Emily was sure that she wasn't just imagining things. This elephant was actually communicating with her. She was getting more and more curious to see where it was leading her. The elephant kept looking around to check on Emily, and it even paused when it noticed that her shoe had gotten stuck in the mud. It was becoming more and more restless, and Emily felt like they were getting closer to their destination. And not much later, when it finally stopped raining, they arrived at a small clearing in the woods. At first, Emily didn't see anything unusual in this clearing. She thought that they just happened to be passing through it, or perhaps the elephant wanted to get some rest. They had been walking for quite some time, and she tried not to think about the fact that she would probably never find her way back. So, you can imagine her surprise when the elephant suddenly started running. "Whoa!" she exclaimed, taken aback by the sudden surge of energy that it showed. Without even really thinking about it, she ran after the elephant, curious to see what had caused its reaction. It started trumpeting loudly, and it felt like the whole forest was shaking. But there was a good reason why the elephant was so upset. Not even a minute later, it came to a halt again, and Emily gladly made use of that moment to catch her breath. The elephant was now letting out soft, wailing sounds, and Emily slowly and carefully approached it. Was it hurt? She was no elephant expert, but it had seemed perfectly healthy until then, and she hadn't spotted any wounds or bleeding. She could see that the elephant was really upset now, and that frightened her a little bit, so she kept her distance. This animal was huge, and it could crush her without any effort if it wanted to. Emily felt that she was beginning to panic, and she slowly walked backward, feeling a sudden urge to run away and get to safety. But then, she saw what was going on. The elephant moved, and Emily could finally see what it was crying about. In front of it, on the grassy ground, was a baby elephant. It lay on the ground, unmoving, and it seemed like there was something wrong with it. Emily's eyes widened and she froze for a second, unsure of what to do next. Luckily, what she assumed was the mother elephant came to help her make that decision. With cautious steps, Emily approached the towering figure of the mother elephant, which, to her surprise, did not charge but rather watched with an intense, almost pleading gaze as she neared the injured baby. Its large, soulful eyes seemed to understand her intentions, allowing her to come close despite the obvious danger, a silent plea for help etched in its stance. Emily's heart pounded as she kneeled beside the baby elephant, her hands trembling at the sight of the bullet wound oozing blood, a cruel and unjust testament to human cruelty. The harsh reality hit her like a freight train, leaving her breathless and filled with a fierce determination to save this innocent creature. Despite its massive size and power, the mother elephant stood still, its eyes locked on Emily with an unnerving intensity that spoke volumes of its desperation and rare trust. It was as if it understood that Emily represented its only hope, making the air thick with unspoken understanding and urgency. Emily's mind raced, realizing the gravity of the baby elephant's injury. It needed more than just first aid. It needed professional medical attention and fast. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her, a desperate clock ticking in the silence of the forest. Frantically, Emily pulled out her phone, her fingers slick with rain and sweat as she dialed for help, only to be met with the crushing silence of no signal. Panic began to set in, the reality of their isolation dawning on her. They were alone, with time running out for the wounded baby. A gasp escaped Emily's lips as the truth dawned on her. This was no accident. The baby elephant was a victim of poachers, targeted and left for dead. Her heart ached with a mixture of rage and sorrow, the urgency to save this innocent life burning fiercer within her. Time and again, Emily hit the call button, each attempt to reach 911 met with frustrating failure as her phone stubbornly refused to find a signal. Her desperation grew with each failed call, the forest around her seeming to close in as she faced the harsh truth of their dire situation. The mother elephant's eyes, deep pools of sorrow and understanding, watched Emily with an intensity that pierced her soul, silently pleading for her to succeed as she repeatedly tried to call for help. The unspoken connection between them was palpable, a shared desperation hanging heavy in the rain-soaked air. With a heavy heart, Emily promised the silently watching mother elephant that she would return with help, her voice firm despite the quiver of uncertainty. As she turned to leave, the weight of her promise settled on her shoulders, a solemn vow that she intended to keep no matter the cost. As Emily pushed through the dense underbrush, the gravity of her promise pressed down on her like the wet branches above. The life of the baby elephant hung precariously in the balance, dependent on her next actions. Each step felt heavier, burdened with the responsibility she had willingly taken on. Emily's fingers frantically danced over her phone, trying every few steps to get a signal, but each attempt was as futile as the last, leaving her feeling more isolated with each failed call. The forest seemed to mock her efforts, its sprawling expanse a barrier between her and the help she desperately sought. Climbing a small muddy hill, Emily hoped the slight elevation would be her salvation, her eyes fixed on her phone, praying for just a single bar of signal. Her breath caught as she willed it to connect, a tiny glimmer of hope in the vast, indifferent wilderness. From her vantage point, Emily could see the mother elephant's anxious pacing, its large form moving with a restless energy that mirrored her own growing desperation. The sight spurred her on, renewing her determination to not let this majestic creature and her baby down. Before disappearing into the forest, Emily turned back to lock eyes with the mother elephant, her gaze firm and resolute, silently communicating her promise to return with help. The connection between them was a powerful force, an unspoken pact forged in the heart of the wild. Emily's resolve hardened as she pressed on, her determination to find a signal unwavering in the face of exhaustion and fear. Every step she took was fueled by the urgent need to save the baby elephant, her mission clear in her mind as she navigated the treacherous terrain. Her heart skipped a beat when her foot brushed against something metallic. A shotgun, abandoned and ominous, lay in her path. The realization that the poachers might still be close sent a shiver down her spine, the danger of her situation suddenly magnified tenfold. With trembling hands, Emily picked up the shotgun, feeling a mix of fear and newfound determination. It was a symbol of the threat surrounding them, but now it was in her hands, a tool she could use to protect the innocent lives depending on her. As Emily continued her search for a signal, the shotgun felt heavy in her hands, not just from its weight, but from the responsibility it symbolized. It was a burden she had never wanted, but now embraced, knowing it could mean the difference between life and death. The cold metal of the shotgun was a constant, grim reminder of the violent reality of poaching. It lay against her shoulder, an unwelcome but necessary companion in the dense, whispering forest, a tangible symbol of the darkness that had brought her here. Emily moved forward with a renewed sense of urgency, the shotgun an unwanted but necessary companion. Each step was a mix of hope and fear, a balancing act between the desperate search for a signal and the ever-present threat of the unseen poachers. Her breath caught as she stumbled upon a camp, the remnants of a fire still smouldering. It was crudely made, but bore the unmistakable signs of human occupation, likely the poachers. The realization that she was possibly standing where they had recently been sent a wave of dread through her. Despite knowing the inherent danger, Emily couldn't resist the urge to search the camp for any useful clues or tools. Her steps were cautious, her senses on high alert, understanding that this reconnaissance could either be a lifeline or a deadly mistake. In the eerie quiet of the poachers' camp, Emily's phone suddenly vibrated with life, a signal finally piercing through the forest's canopy. Her heart leapt with hope, the sudden connection a beacon in the overwhelming darkness. With no time to waste, Emily quickly relayed the dire situation to the 911 operator, her words a rapid stream of urgency, describing the injured baby elephant and their location. She knew every second counted, and her voice carried the weight of their survival. Once the call was made, Emily didn't pause to breathe. She raced back to the clearing, her mind a whirlwind of worry and hope. Each step was a silent plea for the rescuers to be as quick as her beating heart. Back at the clearing, Emily watched over the baby elephant with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, her eyes darting to the path through which help would come. Every rustle of the leaves, every break in the silence, made her heart jump. As the minutes dragged on, the baby elephant's breathing grew more labored, its condition visibly deteriorating. The tension in the air was thick, the weight of the waiting filled with silent prayers for a miracle. The mother elephant's deep, mournful sounds filled the clearing, a heartbreaking anthem of maternal anguish. She stayed close to her baby, her large body a protective fortress, yet her eyes betrayed a deep, unspoken fear and sorrow. The sound of hurried footsteps announced the arrival of a wildlife rescuer who, without a moment's hesitation, began administering urgent care to the baby elephant. Emily watched, a mix of relief and gratitude flooding through her as the professional's hands worked swiftly and surely. With the situation still dire and no police in sight, the rescuer turned to Emily, his expression grave. He stated they couldn't wait any longer and asked her to lead him to the poachers' camp. His voice was firm, a clear call for action that Emily felt compelled to answer. With a deep breath, Emily led the way, her heart pounding with the gravity of the mission. She knew the risks, but also understood that this was about more than just their safety. It was about justice and protecting these majestic creatures from further harm. They moved towards the camp with utmost caution, blending into the forest's natural camouflage. Every step was measured, every breath controlled as they navigated through the underbrush, the poachers' camp drawing ever closer. Peering through the foliage, Emily and the rescuer's eyes met the cold gaze of the poachers. The air was thick with tension, an electric current of impending danger that set their nerves on edge, realizing the peril had escalated beyond their worst fears. The moment the poachers shifted their attention towards them, Emily and the rescuer knew they had to act fast. With hearts racing, they retreated, dodging through trees and underbrush in a frantic bid to return to the clearing, the sounds of pursuit a terrifying motivator. Breathless and shaken, they finally emerged back into the clearing, the familiar sight of the mother and baby elephant a bittersweet relief. While they were momentarily safe, the weight of the unresolved danger hung heavily in the air, a reminder that their ordeal was far from over. The once peaceful clearing tensed as the sound of approaching footsteps signaled the poachers' imminent arrival. Emily's heart sank. The danger they had hoped to evade was now heading straight for them, driven by malice and greed. As the crunching of leaves grew louder, a sense of dread settled over Emily. She realized they were vastly outnumbered and outgunned, the poachers' approaching figures casting long, ominous shadows that seemed to foretell a violent confrontation. The air turned thick with tension as the poachers finally emerged, their eyes cold and calculating. They brazenly demanded the rescuers hand over the baby elephant, their menacing stance leaving no room for negotiation and thrusting everyone into a perilous standoff. Caught between the instinct to protect themselves and the moral imperative to save the elephants, the rescuers were torn. Each second stretched into eternity as they weighed their limited options, the baby elephant's pained cries punctuating the heavy silence. As the poachers advanced, the situation rapidly escalated, the air charged with the imminent threat of violence. Emily felt a paralyzing fear, her mind racing for a solution but finding none, the standoff reaching a fever pitch with no apparent way out. The poachers moved in closer, their circle tightening around Emily and the rescuers. The grim reality of their situation was unmistakable, the odds stacked against them in this desperate, uneven confrontation, the air thick with the scent of danger and defiance. With nowhere to turn, Emily's voice broke the tense silence, her plea for mercy aimed at the poachers' seemingly indifferent hearts. Her words were filled with a raw desperation, a last-ditch effort to appeal to any shred of humanity they might possess. As the poachers raised their weapons, a heavy silence fell over the clearing. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, bracing for the worst, the air thick with the imminent threat of tragedy, every second stretching into an eternity of fear and anticipation. Just as despair seemed to consume the clearing, the faint sound of sirens pierced the tense atmosphere. Hope flickered in Emily's eyes, the distant noise growing steadily louder, a beacon of salvation drawing nearer with each passing second. With a roar that shattered the standoff, police cars burst into the clearing, their lights slicing through the gloom. Officers sprang into action, their arrival a dramatic turn of events that provided a much-needed reprieve and a glimmer of hope in the darkest hour. The tide turned swiftly as the police apprehended the poachers, handcuffs clicking in a satisfying rhythm of justice. Amidst the chaos, Emily noticed a dropped poacher's GPS, its blinking light a silent witness that would ensure their conviction and the safety of the elephants. Gently and with great care, the baby elephant was transported to a sanctuary, a place of healing and safety. Emily watched, her heart swelling with relief and hope as the young creature was given a second chance at a peaceful, protected life. In the sanctuary, the baby elephant's spirit began to mend alongside its physical wounds. Its playful antics and bright eyes spoke volumes of its resilience, a touching testament to its will to live and the care it received. In a quiet, heartfelt moment, the mother elephant reached out to Emily with her trunk, a gentle touch that spoke louder than words. It was an expression of deep gratitude and a bond sealed by the shared ordeal, a connection that transcended species, forged in adversity. As Emily watched the elephants in the sanctuary, a mix of relief, wonder, and profound respect filled her. The journey they had all undertaken was etched into her memory, a poignant reminder of the bond formed and the lives forever changed. It was the end of a harrowing chapter, but also the start of a new beginning.